brother put our dad in hospice when he fell sick and never even visited him, and yet has the audacity to be shocked when our dad's lawyer tells him that he left all of his estate to me, and now he's running his mouth off about me to our family because I'm not giving him anything and he can keep drowning in debt. My brother, 33 male, and I, 28 male, recently had a huge fight and everybody in the family seems to be on his side, so I'm not sure if what I'm doing is the right thing or not. Basically, I have refused to share my inheritance with him even though he's drowning in debt right now since his company has been failing ever since the pandemic. His account is overdrawn, his investors are backing out and refusing to put more money into the company, and he's basically just screwed. So he needs my financial help to get him out of this situation, and it's not like I can't afford to help him out. I'm a doctor and I make good money myself, so I can definitely contribute a bit of my inheritance to support him, but I'm not doing it because of certain principles and morals, and my relatives think that I'm being too harsh. For context, the reason I'm not helping him out is that in the past year, he hadn't come back home even once to see our father when his health was failing and only returned for the funeral. Our dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's about 10 years ago, and 2 years ago, his health started getting worse. Both my brother and I had moved out after we started college, and I had been staying out of state for the past many years. While we were away, it was our mother who had been taking care of our dad. But unfortunately, she passed away during COVID. After her passing, my brother and I decided that since I live out of state, he was going to stay with our dad and take care of him, and we were going to split any out-of-pocket medical expenses 40–60% with me paying the majority, since that would be fair. My dad had a nurse during the day, and after my brother came back home from work, he would take care of him. This is the arrangement that we have stuck to for the past 5 years. I would visit my father often, almost every alternate weekend, to give my brother some well-deserved time off. By then, he had already started to get stressed about work because his company wasn't doing too well, and I remember often lending him money that he said he would return as soon as he could, but he never did and I never asked for it back either. With time, his situation only got worse, and during quarantine, I couldn't visit either, and neither could I spend much time in contact with him because things were really busy at my place of work, and I think everyone in the medical field was supremely stressed out. But even then, I did occasionally check up on my father whenever I could, and even though my father said that he was not feeling too good and his health was getting worse by the day, my brother always told me that he was just overreacting and everything was totally fine. Then finally, once the quarantine was lifted, I started visiting again and I realized that my father's health truly wasn't doing that well. So my brother and I had a bit of a fight about how he was neglecting our dad instead of taking him to the hospital when he clearly required it. For the next few months, I started visiting every weekend and tried to make sure that my dad was taken care of while my brother was busy, and it was very difficult for me because I even had my own work to think about. This went on for almost a year until last year when, on one of my visits, I came back home and I saw that the house was empty and locked. When I called my brother, he told me that earlier that week, he had moved our father into hospice because he couldn't afford to take care of him anymore. He had been making the arrangements for the past few months, but he hadn't even thought to tell me about it because he knew that I would be against it, and obviously I was very upset about that because as far as I was concerned, by then I was paying for all out-of-pocket medical expenses. I knew that he couldn't afford it, and so he didn't have to spend a dime, and that's when the truth came out. Instead of using that money for our father's expenses, he was putting that money into his company and trying desperately to save it. I honestly would have sued him. I was that upset. But since we only had a verbal agreement, I decided against it because that would take up a lot of my time, money, and resources. I decided that my energy would be better spent taking care of my father rather than getting back at my brother. So I decided to take some time off of work and managed to bring my dad back home with my brother's help after I promised him that I would not pursue any legal action against him. On that visit, when I finally met him at the hospice, he told me that even when he had been informed by my brother that he was being moved into hospice, he hadn't contacted me about it because he did not want to bother me and put me in a difficult situation, and that's when I decided that I was going to move back home and take care of my dad. So I quit my job at the hospital where I previously worked, moved back home, and started staying with my dad. After I started working at a hospital here, I stuck to the previous arrangement of having a nurse stay with him during the day while I was out. By then, I have cut all ties with my brother and had nothing to do with him. For the past year, I have been taking care of my father completely by myself, and after the whole fight that we had about the hospice situation, he didn't contact me, and neither did he ever come back home to visit our dad even once. Our father would often ask about him, but I had nothing to say to him, so I just let it go. And with time, his health started getting worse even though I was doing everything in my power to extend his time here. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks ago, we lost him and finally my brother returned for the funeral. I was pretty annoyed to see him here after so long, crying like he had lost everything, especially considering the fact that he hadn't even bothered to visit our dad when he was alive, and now he was shedding crocodile tears. But at the funeral, because I wanted it to be a dignified affair, I didn't say anything. However, later, when we were contacted by the lawyer, that's when we had our big fight. The lawyer had informed us that my dad had modified his will a couple of months ago, and now instead of everything being split equally, most of it was going to be inherited by my brother, only going to receive my dad's old car, which is pretty much worthless. But I'm sure he left that to him so that my brother wouldn't be able to contest the will, something that would have invariably happened if our dad had left him nothing. I'm going to be receiving a significant sum of money since back in the day, before he had to stop working. He had been quite a renowned lawyer, and even the house that we live in that I'm set to inherit is worth something. And I don't have a doubt that if my brother had received any of this, he would have sold it and used the money to pay off his debts. But since he didn't get anything apart from the car, after the lawyer contacted us, he called me and started asking me to help him out here. He believes that even though I had been staying with our father for the past year, it was he who had been taking care of him for the past many years. And even if he had slacked off recently, whatever he had done in the past still counted for something. So he believes that he is entitled to half of whatever I'm going to be inheriting, regardless of whatever our father planned. But I don't feel the same way at all, and I told him that I'm not going to be sharing anything, especially considering the fact that in the past, even though he had taken care of our father, he had also lied to me about many things. And let's not forget the fact that he had put our dad into hospice without my approval and used the money that I was sending for him for his own purposes. So I think as far as our finances and efforts go, we can call it even, and I don't owe him anything. He was not ready to admit that though, and he said that I was being selfish, especially given the fact that he actually needed the money and I did not as badly as he did, at least. And so I should share my inheritance with him because that's what brothers would do. So we ended up getting into a huge fight because I did not agree with him. And afterward, he spoke about it to everybody else in the family, and now all my uncles, aunts, and cousins and stuff are attacking me, saying that I'm being selfish and this is not what our father would have wanted, and that as family, I should be more understanding. So now I really don't understand what to do. I've started to feel like I might be the bad guy here. Ida for refusing to share my inheritance with my brother who hadn't visited our father for 1 year. Update 1. Hello. Thank you so much to everybody who commented on my post. All the condolences and all the support really mean a lot to me, especially right now since my entire family is against me. To answer some of the questions that people have, yes. Everybody in the family who is attacking me right now is aware of the fact that my brother had not visited our father in the past year. They are also aware of the fact that my brother had moved our father into hospice without even talking to me first, and also that he had been misusing the funds that I had been sending to him and putting them to his personal use rather than using it for our father's expenses. In spite of knowing all these things, they are still on his side, and they think that I'm being the selfish one here. For a while, because I had been very emotionally devastated after my father's passing, I had allowed these things to get to me, but right now, it just doesn't matter to me anymore. They can think whatever they want. They can paint me to be the bad guy, but all things said and done, I am definitely not going to be helping my brother out financially. He has already taken enough from me, and I have gladly helped him out in the past. But after what has happened in the past year, I don't think that I need to do that anymore. I can understand that his company going down has been a huge source of stress and disappointment for him, and maybe these factors could make people act out of desperation. But the least he could have done was at least pretend to be apologetic for it. Instead, he started acting like he was entitled to half of everything. And I'm really sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but he's really not. I've been thinking everything over for the past couple of days, and I really can't come up with any plausible explanation as to why I would need to share my inheritance with him. As I had said in the beginning, it's not even about the money. It's about the principle of the thing. He might have taken care of our father for the first few years after our mom passed away, but it's not like he didn't have any help. I was always there for him, but instead, when it was my turn, he didn't help me out at all, and I don't begrudge him for that. I hardly even care. But if my dad thinks that he doesn't deserve anything apart from that old car, then I think that's what I should stick to as well. It's also been very funny and ironic for me to hear from everyone that this sort of behavior is not what my father would have wanted, when in fact, this is exactly what he wanted. He literally wrote my brother out of his will. If he had wanted my brother to have anything, then he would have left it to him himself. Anyway, all that is said and done, I have made my decision. And to deal with all the hate from everyone, I've started blocking them. I don't need to worry myself about what other people will think because as far as I can remember, none of these people ever came to our aid, whether it was when my mom was struggling with her health or even with my dad. They would only visit a couple of times and be a little sad about it, but that was it. Nobody ever went out of their way to check up on me or my brother emotionally, let alone contribute financially, and that's completely fine. They are our relatives. They are not our immediate family, so I never expected anything more from them. But right now, I feel like they are overstepping. As I said, they're not our immediate family. They have no idea what I have been through, and right now, even if my brother is going out and speaking out of turn about whatever the situation is between us, it should be their common sense that tells them not to get involved. It's just a decent thing to do, to hear my brother out if they want to and then let us be, because this is between the two of us. This has nothing to do with them, and since they have never gone out of their way to help us out in our times of trouble, I don't understand why they think they can go out of their way to create trouble for me right now. Because in all honesty, that's exactly what my relatives are doing. They are encouraging my brother's behavior right now, and it's only going to lead to more drama. And maybe that's exactly what they want, more drama, so that they'll have something to talk about. It's bad enough that my brother is engaging in this and indulging them. It's even worse that they are probably going to be treating this as some sort of source of entertainment, which is just a really cheap and undignified thing to do. But it's not like I can do anything about the situation. I can't stop my brother from running his mouth, and I don't even want to talk to him. And neither can I control my relatives' opinions, so I'm just gonna have to block them all and hope that they take the hint and just stay away from me. Update 2. Okay, so 5 days ago, I blocked my relatives and my brother, and after that, they were not able to contact me. So I thought that everything was done and dusted and that he would not disturb me anymore. But today he showed up at my house, since I'm still living at my dad's place, and started demanding to be let in when I refused to open the door. He started bringing up stuff from the past, saying that he was the one who had been here for most of the time. I had only spent 1 year with my father, taking care of him, and even if our father had chosen to leave everything to me, at least I should be fair enough to give him what he deserves. I really don't understand why he feels like he deserves anything at all. And I told him that I'm giving him exactly what he does, which is nothing. Once again, I had to shout at him and explain to him that whatever time he had spent with our father here, taking care of him, he nullified all of that with his recent actions. Yet again, I had to remind him how he had moved our father into hospice without any warning, without even consulting me first, how he had chosen to use that money that I have been sending for his own personal use instead of what I had intended it for. And even after all that, if he still believes that he deserves any part of the inheritance, then he's just deluding himself. Besides, he had the chance to at least try and fix things with our father in the past year, but he chose to stay away on purpose. He can't have his cake and eat it too. He avoided our dad in his last days, never bothered to show up for him, and now he expects me to just happily split the inheritance with him just because he's in trouble. Fat chance of that happening. I had said these same things to him on the phone call when we were fighting, but back then I had at least tried to be polite. This time I didn't bother. I just shouted and screamed at him as loudly as I could and let out all my frustrations because I was totally just done with this situation today. I also ended up screaming at him about how heartless he was, even though he was trying to paint me as the bad guy here. He had gone out of his way to talk to our relatives, trying to turn them against me, turning this into some sort of spectacle for everyone to enjoy, even though he knew that they were only getting involved because they wanted to be a part of this drama. I told him that he was not only being disrespectful to our father, but he was also being completely insensitive to me because while he had been away for the past year, I had been taking care of our father. And every time that our father would ask about him, I would have to disappoint him by telling him that I didn't know when he would show up. He has no idea how emotionally difficult all of that was for me because he was not even here. He didn't even bother to show up. So now the least he can do, just out of respect for our father, is just stay away from me and let me grieve in peace, but he's not even allowing me to do that. He's constantly bothering me, getting on my nerves about the money, and even sending our relatives after me, which is probably the lowest thing that I can imagine. Both of us have gone through something very difficult. I can understand that, but at least I'm not going out of my way to make things difficult for him, which is what he's doing for me right now. He tried to argue with me, telling me that his situation is even more dire than mine because at least I was not struggling financially, but I told him that that was his own fault. Any businessman worth his salt knows when to let it go. And I'm sorry to say this, but he screwed things up for himself by continuing to put money into the company, even when he noticed that it was not doing too well and knew that this was bound to fail. A lot of people had to give up work that they loved during the pandemic, and he would have done so too if he knew what was good for him. I knew that he had put a lot of hard work into it, but he should have done the practical thing and pulled the plug while he was ahead, but he didn't do that. So now expecting me to be sympathetic towards him, especially when he had never been sympathetic to either me or our father, that's really foolish of him. And then very unexpectedly, he actually broke down sobbing on the porch, saying that I had no idea what I was talking about and that I was being insanely greedy, and he couldn't believe that I was doing this to him right now. That shocked me a little because my brother is a pretty tough guy, and I had never heard him crying before, especially not as an adult, so I had no idea how to react at that point in time. I pretty much just froze in my place. I couldn't even open the door because I was literally that taken aback. While he was crying, He told me that I had no idea what he had gone through and that while he admits that he had done a lot of things that he shouldn't have and he regrets all of it, he's paying the price for it right now and all he's asking for is some help from me. He confessed that he has been trying to put together money to get himself out of debt, and it has caused him all his self-respect and dignity to be asking his friends, relatives and now even me for whatever money we can afford to help him out with. He said that he's completely bankrupt and he's desperate, which is why he's been coming to me again and again, and he knows that it's very difficult for me as well, but he doesn't have any other way out of this anymore. He also said that this was one of the biggest reasons that he couldn't bring himself to come back and face our father after the whole incident with the hospice situation and stuff because he was too ashamed of himself to admit that he had messed up. So he just decided to stay away from us, but that doesn't mean that it was any easier for him. In the past year, he has pretty much lost everything that he had. He had to start living in an apartment with a bunch of roommates, and he is sick and tired of knocking on doors, asking for help, begging people to understand his situation. So with me, he felt that he was actually entitled to something since we are family after all. But even I turned my back on him, and rightfully so, because after everything that he had done, he had no right to expect anything from me. But even then, he just couldn't give up on this last thing, and after a while, he stopped crying and I came back to my senses. So I opened the door, let him in, handed him a glass of cold water so he would calm down, and we just sat together for a couple of minutes so he could compose himself, because after what had just happened I don't think anybody in my position would have been able to ignore him. Least of all, I'm a pretty soft person anyway, and watching my older brother break down like that even in spite of everything he had done wrong, I couldn't just let him sit outside and then leave. While we were sitting together, I didn't have anything to say to him, so I just sat there quietly. After a while, he told me that he was really sorry for bothering me and he could understand my point of view, but he was so desperate that he had been ignoring it all along. He apologized pretty sincerely and told me that now if I wanted to help him out, he was in no position to reject that. But if I didn't, he would respect that as well, because after everything that had happened, he wasn't sure if he even deserved it. And then after a short goodbye he just walked out. And now? I have no idea what to do. I just feel terrible about everything. I feel terrible about what both of us are going through, since clearly neither of us has had it easy. It just all sucks and I don't know what I can do right now. Update 3. So 3 days ago my brother was at my doorstep and I had no idea what to do about the situation. After he left, I was still very confused, so I decided not to reach out to him until I had cleared my head a bit. But before I could do that, he reached out to me today. He sent me an email in the morning, and in the beginning, he apologized for everything that he had put me through. He said that it was totally unnecessary, and now he's going to look for alternate ways to get himself out of this mess. He said that I was right. He had dug himself into a hole out of love for whatever he was doing, not realizing that the mess was getting bigger and bigger the longer he went on putting money into the company that was failing him. He told me that he doesn't need the money from me right now or any sort of financial support. He's going to deal with this on his own. He's in talks with lawyers and banks and thinking of filing for bankruptcy, and has told me that whatever little money he still has, he's going to try and get himself out of this mess with that money. Apart from that, he does have a couple of friends and even a few ex-co-workers and staff who are willing to help him out right now, so he told me not to worry about him too much. I was feeling terrible for him, so I decided to reply and tell him that whatever he needed, he could ask me for it, and I would be there to help him out, because all things kept aside, this is a really terrible situation to be in right now. And he is, after all, my brother. But he told me that he really doesn't want me to help him out. He wants to do this on his own. I've already helped him out a lot in the past as it is, and he can't keep counting on me to bail him out every single time he messes up. He also said certain things about this being the most befitting punishment that he could get for being a total disappointment to his father, and I felt really bad for him, but I had nothing to say to him at that point. I just replied to him wishing him luck, hoping that this situation works out soon enough and he's able to get his life back on track. After that, he didn't reply anymore, and now I really do hope that things work out for him, because this has been a really difficult and trying time for all of us, and I'm sure that if my father was still around, he probably wouldn't have wanted his son to suffer either. So that's exactly what I'm keeping in mind. I'm going to keep hoping that all of this blows over soon. Update 4. Hi, everyone. It's been close to 6 months since my last update and I've been very busy with work. I've tried to keep myself distracted from everything that's been happening back when I was posting here regularly, and so I haven't had the time to come back here. But now that almost 6 months have passed since my dad left us, I thought of coming back here to post another update. I'll begin with myself. I'm doing well on a professional scale. Work is good and so is the money. A couple of weeks ago, I finally received the inheritance that had been left to me. Now, coming to my brother, he hasn't exactly stayed in touch with me after the few emails that we exchanged in my last update, and I haven't tried to reach out to him. I figured that if he wanted to speak to me, he could reach out by himself. But I did get to know from a couple of his friends that he did end up filing for bankruptcy and ultimately he was able to get himself out of the whole mess with his company. Now they are all helping him get back on his own feet, letting him stay with them, trying to get him jobs in good positions given his work experience. And they reached out to me to ask if I would be willing to contribute financially.